Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to my Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Thank you.
Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 88. We have another presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party in 2024. This time it's Chase Oliver. He's in the chase for the nomination. We've had some other people on, and we're going to talk to Chase about his campaign. How are you, Chase?
I'm doing fantastic, actually. Just enjoying some good weather out here in Georgia in between heavy thunderstorms.
Yeah, you're probably getting some maybe a little bit of offshoots from the hurricane, I suppose, aren't you?
Yeah, we're getting the outer bands of it, so not hit as bad as Florida. And our thoughts and prayers go out to those folks down there suffering from the hurricane.
Yeah,
hope they're doing all right down there in Florida.
Hopefully everybody's safe. Yeah. So I always like to start off with this, Chase. How did you become a libertarian?
Well, that's a great story. Well, first, I got to tell you how I became politically active. And that was because I opposed the war in Iraq. I was in high school when 9/11 happened, and people I went to high school with suddenly started getting sent over to Iraq on a war that we now know, and many of us knew at the time, was completely based on lies, faulty intelligence, manipulating intelligence from the CIA and other sources to basically justify this invasion of Iraq, which was completely unjustified. So I became an anti-war activist, and reflexively, because Bush was a Republican, I joined the Democratic Party. And then it wasn't until 2008, I helped Barack Obama get elected. Like, I fought for him to get elected because he said all these great dove promises of, I want to end wars and talk to our enemies and stop Gitmo and stop the drones. And he didn't do any of that stuff. He completely walked back all of his foreign policy promises. And so that's when I left the Democratic Party. And a couple years later, it was at the Atlanta Pride Festival. You can see the Gadsden flag behind me.
Yeah.
It was a couple years later that I was at the Atlanta Pride Festival, and the Libertarian Party of Georgia was doing outreach there. Their candidate for governor, John Mons, talked to me about the anti-war position of the Libertarian Party, and that's what got me involved.
Yeah, John Mons is I think he's a great ambassador. Yeah, he's a really nice guy and just always puts on a good appearance. And he's from Georgia too. So you've always been in Georgia?
Yep. Well, most of my life. I was born in Nashville, Tennessee. I spent a little bit of time in Texas as like a really little kid, but like elementary school age, like 7 years old, I've lived in and around Atlanta in Georgia. And it's a great place to grow up. And I had that kind of standard middle class existence. And I love the Peach State, but I really loved actually, I've already campaigned for Senate here in Georgia. So I've been all over Georgia, but now I'm getting to get all over the country running for president. So I get to see how different the rest of the country is as compared to Georgia. There's a lot less sweet tea as you go north.
Oh yeah, you can find it. Yeah, that's interesting. I know other people. I don't know if you know Carrie Wedler and you've seen her burn her Obama shirt video. She's another great activist. It's interesting. Yeah, I wasn't shocked, but yeah, and of course that was of course when Bob Barr ran, and we had it's good to know we brought people in because of the anti-war message. So did you had a lot of friends? Did you have any friends not come back or?
Well, my friends that went off have come back for the most part. I'm lucky that I don't know anybody personally that has passed away in the wars. But what I do know is a lot of my friends have come back with PTSD and also physical injuries. And it is because of our imperialistic foreign policy, our having a military footprint all over the world, that these people had to seek both physical therapy and mental health therapy to overcome a lot of caused by the war. So luckily I don't know anybody who was lost, but I do know people who had their lives severely changed by the war in Iraq. And so it's something very near and dear to my heart. And like you said, it's the foreign policy of the Libertarian Party that has been opposing these wars, continue to oppose these wars. And my first vote for president was actually in 2012 with the first Gary Johnson run. And it was because I was really just sick and tired of the lies that were coming from the Republican and Democratic parties.
Yeah, we've got quite a few. That also reminds me, Shane Hazel, also from Georgia, also a veteran. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he ran for the other Senate seat, or he ran for governor?
Yeah, well, he ran for John Ossoff's Senate seat in 2020, forced to run off there, and then ran for governor in 2022 as well.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Georgia's really becoming a battleground state. Wasn't always that way, but it's kind of shifted over the years.
Absolutely. We, they say we're a purple state, but I say we're purple with a nice specks of gold all over the state. We actually have a rising liberty movement, and I'm very proud to be part of that and to do my part to kind of spread that message to as many Georgia voters as possible. I knocked on literally thousands of doors during my Senate campaign in 2022, and the reception was overall positive because a lot of people were just happy to see that somebody who was running for office was actually doing the door knocking.
So is the Senate run your first run for any office, or did you run for anything else besides that before that?
No. I ran for Congress in 2020 when John Lewis passed away. He was a civil rights icon in the city of Atlanta. When he passed away, his seat went up, and at that point, there was no signature requirement to be able to get on the ballot. Normally, for us to run for Congress, we have some of the highest signature requirements in the country to actually be able to run for Congress. So we took full advantage of the no signature requirement, got me on the ballot. And because of that, a lot of people in Atlanta heard a libertarian running for Congress for the first time in their lives. And it was a great honor to run in that race. That was the summer of 2020. So like the height of the George Floyd protests, the criminal justice movement. And so that's what I mostly focused my campaign around because there was a great need for it in the city.
Yeah. So you've already got two campaigns under your belt. That's good experience. We definitely want to have, people running for president who, know what it's like to get out there and campaign, although every campaign's different. What have you learned? What have you learned so far with your involvement in the LP and from your activism?
Well, I can say that I've learned an awful lot since 2010, right? Like I've only grown more in the movement. I think that's actually one of the themes of my campaign now is that we need to be letting people into the party, bring people into the tent who are not the most hardcore of libertarians. Litmus testing to bring people into the tent is never going to allow us to grow as a movement. We need to have people coming in who are broadly speaking think that the government is too big, too intrusive, too expensive. Once you get in the building, then you get the finer points of that libertarian philosophy. That's when you have those long discussions over a couple bourbons at a libertarian convention with your friends, and you really start getting to the nitty gritty of it. But until we bring people in, we're never going to grow the movement. I die-hard monarchist libertarian the day that I walked in the party. I am now, and that's because of years of having those conversations and getting to where I have kind of fine-tuned where I am as a libertarian. I think that's the conversations we need to be allowing as a party and as a movement. But some of the lessons that I've learned along the way is, don't be afraid to do the hard work yourself. Like get out there and pound the pavement. You have to actually reach out to the voters beyond just being on social media. That's the biggest lesson I've learned being a candidate. And I can say that was totally proven by my Senate race because every county where I did events or did door knocking or any actual outreach, I did higher than my total, than my average vote of 2.1%, 4 and 5% in some places. Places that I wasn't able to campaign in, I did lower because I didn't have that name ID of actually getting out there amongst the community. And so that's the biggest lesson is like, be available. Retail politics actually does make a difference. I'm wearing an Iowa shirt. I certainly learned that at the Iowa State Fair. I talked to maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people who walked by our booth and got to speak on the stage there. It was a great opportunity to have that regular feedback of what people are worried about, which is namely right now it's the economy, it's education, and it's the ability for people to make ends meet at the end of the day. So inflation. So like those are the things that I'm really, really focusing on because that's what the voters have told me to focus on.
Yeah, that's you've got to know how to read the room, so to speak. You can't talk about, and you've got to talk about things that are on people's mind. And I think economic issues, I didn't, realize now that was, but obviously for a lot of people, that's always the issue, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. Where do you think you're, so you ran for Congress, so you're just outside of Atlanta, right?
Yeah, now I am. At the time I was living in Atlanta, but now I'm just north of the city. So still inside the perimeter, as they say. So I'm still I-285 perimeter, but I don't live in Atlanta proper anymore.
Yeah, the Beltway is often defined the city. It's So, do you think is it? And I suppose Georgia, it's mostly Atlanta's probably more blue, but if you get out into the small towns, it's more red.
Yeah, you that's that usual divide that you see, particularly amongst rural and suburban and urban communities. That is also playing out here in Georgia. But one of the things that I think you're really seeing is that Georgia has a lot of that libertarian streak of even those people who are maybe more fiscally conservative, they like their guns. They're a little bit more socially permissive in some areas, than you would think. And then also in the city of Atlanta, you got a lot of people who are really upset about how the government treats people on an individual level when it comes to starting a business or being an entrepreneur. And then right now, even the city of Atlanta is pushing back against there's a Stop Cop City movement to cancel a police training facility that the people of the city don't want. And what is the city of Atlanta government, Democrats, doing? They're using signature matching to try to throw out referendum signatures, which is something that they have decried in the past, but yet right now we don't hear a peep from the Stacey Abrams, the Raphael Warnocks, the John Ossoffs of the world. They're totally silent as Democrats are doing the same kind of thing that they've accused Republicans of doing in the past. And so you see a lot of anger for the Democratic Party, even in these blue areas. So I think that's actually prime for libertarian impact.
Yes. What's signature matching?
So basically what they do is, you would go around and gather referendum signatures as you would. And what they do is they find any government signature on file where you've signed your name to any government thing, and they try to match it. And they say, well, if it doesn't match close enough, we can say that that's a faulty signature and toss it out. And it's like handwriting can be different on any day. Like we're not all, we're not all Donald Trump where we sign it. It looks like an earthquake graph going off a seismograph. Some people just sign their name and they're done. And so to me, it is it's just a way to throw out signatures. It's a way to basically screw over the referendum movement. We have over 100,000 signatures ready to go, and we only need 70,000. So the government's going to try to throw out as many as they can. They love to do that in Georgia.
Who have been some of your major libertarian influences, whether they be candidates or writers or novelists or whatever?
Yeah. So, I was asked this question. I worked for Students for Liberty for a little while. That was one of the first questions they asked in the job interview. Spoiler alert there. And yes. I'll say this. Some of my favorites, I love Milton Friedman as an economist. I think he's somebody that breaks down limited government economic theory in a way that I think is just very digestible. His program that was on PBS as well as his book is something that's very easy introduction into these kind of libertarian free market policies. I also love Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the guys who created South Park. I think they are so good at skewing pop culture and culture in general in a way that is entertaining. It makes us laugh, but also makes you think about a lot of stuff. Like there's not any major topic they have not covered on South Park in a way that makes light of the situation, but also makes us talk about these things right in a real way. So they're definitely one of my major influences. And as far as candidates go, I loved Gary Johnson in 2012. I think that was actually the better ticket with Jim Gray. I think he had a little bit more energy maybe in 2012. That happens with us as we age. But I really liked that campaign for president. I also like some of these other campaigns that we've had for governor recently. Donald Rainwater out of Indiana ran an awesome campaign for governor. I'm going to toot my own horn. I caused a runoff in Georgia that caused national whatever. Yes. For serious, though, I would say I like those people who really don't talk about libertarianism as deep, thinking 500-page tomes, because it's hard to get people to crack those nuts. I like the people who are kind of those pop culture libertarians who really make us kind of think about the philosophy in a way that's more maybe entertaining or enlightening than we would think. And to that end, I used to love watching the show Penn and Teller's Bullshit. I think that was one of the greatest shows ever because it exposed a lot of the BS that goes on in government, a lot of the lies that you see every day that, if you just take a moment just to scratch just barely at the surface, you see all this crap going on. So that's the kind of libertarian philosophy I think that's going to really break through. And again, once we get you in the tent, that's when we hand you the Hayek and all the other major tomes like Road to Serfdom. I think is probably my favorite. If you were to go typical libertarian tome, book on libertarianism, there's Hayek's Road to Serfdom, and then Mises on liberalism, I think is a good one.
Yeah. Mises is not, some of these economists are not easy to read. I would never hand a new person Mises. I mean, Mises is good, but, and I don't know if he had some difficulties just because it wasn't his first language, but and definitely we need, Trey Parker and Matt Stone. I mean, the South Park guys. Yeah, it's always been very libertarian. I totally agree. And, to a certain extent, Penn and Teller, I don't know what's been happening with those guys lately, but yeah, it's definitely something else there.
Well, I will say this. I know Teller had heart problems. So if he's still suffering from that, get well soon, dude. I hope you're doing good. I've actually seen their show in Vegas. It was amazing. as a guy who likes magic, it's probably the best magic show I've ever been to in my life. They lit an American wrapped in the Constitution, and they made it disappear, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, we also have our own libertarian magician, that Doc Dixon, who's one of Tom Woods' friends. He seems like he's pretty solid. He's got like 7 kids. There's a lot of different people out there that I think put it out into the culture, and I think putting it out into the culture is huge. You know, I mean, for example, what did you think of the movie Dallas Buyers Club?
I mean, I think it's actually I actually love that movie because it exposes a lot of what the FDA's problem. I tell people a lot of the time, you know, if you really want to find an organization or group of people who fought back against the FDA, kind of brought them to their knees and really forced them to comply with medical freedom, look no further than the LGBTQ community throughout the late 80s and early 90s as they fought for medical freedom for HIV/AIDS treatments. You know, if you ever want to see like a great video, libertarians would just be like laughing over at how crazy it is. Look up ACT UP shuts down the FDA on YouTube. It is a whole video of activists basically going into the FDA and shutting them down for a day by doing massive demonstrations of non-compliance. It was cool stuff. And so that's something that I think, you know, we can definitely look to. And Dallas Buyers Club tells the story about people who are struggling with the right to try, which is actually, I always try to speak good of my political opponents about one thing. And that's my one thing that I really tout for, you know, other than the criminal justice bill, the First Step Act, is the right to try bill that Trump passed. I'll say that that's something that I think across the board in a bipartisan, tripartisan manner, we should really be getting behind, is the right for people who are suffering to be able to try whatever experimental medications want you to try to alleviate that suffering and get the FDA out of the way of that stuff. And Dallas Buyers Club is a visceral example of a film. And it's a great example of kind of pop culture libertarianism, being able to break through into the mainstream in a real visceral way that maybe people who don't realize how libertarian they are can see that and go, maybe I am more libertarian than I thought.
Yeah, I think if you make the protagonist the right kind of character, it definitely helps. I mean, you know, it's and you know, it's funny, but because conservatives didn't really know how to react to that movie, even though they're allegedly pro-capitalist, I was rather surprised by that. But yeah, that was a real, and you know, and Matthew McConaughey could probably, you know, I live in Texas, he could probably run for governor here and win.
Yeah, I mean, he's like a, you know, just based on his love of Longhorns football alone, I think he could probably swing that. And he performance, but like you said, sometimes we have to look beyond the basic libertarian, like the tomes and like the big economic talks that, frankly, if you're not really into economics and that's not your thing, your eyes are gonna glaze over, just like if you're in class in school and you're bored, right? We have to be able to bring libertarianism out in a way that's both exciting, but also positive, forward thinking, talking about how great liberty is for people, not just how terrible the state is. Like on a deep level, most people know the government sucks and that it's terrible, but we have to be talking about like why these libertarian options, why freedom is a better option than state control or central planning in a way that makes sense to the average person who just does not have the time of their day to get real deep into libertarian weeds like folks like you and I do, who are a little bit more nerdy about it. And that's fine. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a candidate, is because I love doing the job of distilling down our messaging in a way that's digestible and bringing people into the movement so they can grow within the movement. We can have more activism and, again, more candidates that we're winning more offices across the board. That's how we're going to grow our party. And a presidential candidate like myself, my job is to be the chief brand officer. It's to be somebody who really makes people look at the brand and go, that's an attractive thing. Like, that's something I want to be a part of. And I think I can do that pretty well. And it's why I'm running.
Yeah, you know, for somebody who's been around the LP as long as you have, you still seem to be very optimistic. I mean, I don't know what happens, but you know, how do you stay optimistic? You just get out there and talk to the right people, or you must have some really good people on your team too.
I do have a really awesome campaign team. I have amazing volunteers. We have almost 200 volunteers who are signed up to our regular work that help us out as I travel across the country. I also have a great core campaign staff who does amazing work. I would not be able to do what I do without them. But as far as staying positive, part of that is just the way I was raised. You know, maybe it's the evangelical, you know, being raised evangelical in me, but I've always been somebody who gets out and speaks the good news, be a happy messenger, turn the other cheek. The glass is always half full. You know, we can always make things better. That's how I've always been. I've never been one who is doom and gloom and a pessimist and thinks, oh, we're just so far down status and we'll never be able to turn our way back. I always believe that there's a path to get back. We just have to be willing to do the hard work. And part of that is being a positive force. And again, having that positivity and empathy for other people so they see that this movement is attractive and something they can willing to get behind and grow organically. Because if we're ever going to beat the two-party system, we have to be beating that drum of positivity. We have to be out there and be happy messengers. Otherwise, we're never going to get people to join us. People don't want to join a doom and gloom party. They want to join a happy, positive party. And I can say that right now with fundraising. Right now, we've raised $7,000 this month. We are moving right along and growing and getting more and more donor supporters as well. So I got to say, it seems attractive to folks within the Libertarian Party as well. They like what I'm hearing, or they like what I'm saying, rather.
Do you have any volunteers that you'd like to acknowledge? I don't think we can go through all 200 of them, but are there any of them you want to mention by name or not?
Well, I'll tell you about some of my core campaign staff who's really been making a difference on the ground. Like, I just got back from the Iowa State Fair, and if I didn't have so Kelsey Lyons, who is my communications director, she was literally on the ground with me the entire time, making sure that like every time there was a photo opportunity, there was a camera taking the picture. She got me all over that fairgrounds to make sure I was doing everything that candidates need to do to really get out and about and do that retail politics. And right behind her was Jenny Cadle, who's a member of LP Iowa. And she was like my on the ground person. Like, as soon as I hit the ground, she's there with the car, ready to get things in the car, ready to move as fast as possible. She rearranged her whole schedule for me to be able to do this. So it's that, I have some awesome people who prepare my emails and who help get the email blasts out there and help me draft press releases. Like, there are people all up and down the stage that make this campaign look as attractive as possible. I just do the work of a candidate, which is get out where I need to be, speak the message in a way that resonates, and trust that I have amazing people doing it. I got to say, I really, really respect my, my campaign manager through the nomination process is Steve Dasbach. He's done great work throughout this process, as well as, my campaign manager throughout the exploratory phase, Tyler Harris, did amazing work. He's a former executive director of the party. And then I always got to shout out my man, Tarnell Brown, who is an amazing economist. He's got a brilliant mind. And he's helping me with those policy points and just really nailing down the best way to speak out that libertarian message. So we got a great group of people, man. It's fantastic.
Yeah, you do. And Dasbach has been around a long time. He managed to...
He calls himself my senior advisor because he's the only senior citizen who's on my team. Really, we're a younger team who's dynamic, but we have to have that institutional knowledge there as well, which we utilize. But I think we're running this campaign a little bit differently than anyone who's ever run before. And I think he's enjoying it as well.
Yeah, he's definitely, I'm sure he is enjoying it. Yeah, some of these people, I mean, it's a lot of work. But you just got to keep pushing forward. Yeah, Tyler Harris, former executive director. We've got a lot of hardworking people out there doing the good fights. Yeah, and I think Tarnell's in Georgia. So yeah. Well, thanks for Well,
I got to shout out my last person. I got to mention Amber, who she set up this interview with us. She does all my media contacts and things like that. Amber Howell, she's amazing out of Georgia as well, out there in Lake Hartwell. So I really had to shout her out too, because she got me on this show to talk to you, man. So that's the work she does. It helps me make sure I'm at the right place at the right time.
Staying positive. What's your general response to, well, if I vote for you, I'm throwing my vote away?
Well, I always tell people, if you're not voting for someone you believe in, you're throwing your vote away. If someone tells you, hey, you need to vote for my candidate X or Y, because if you vote for the third party, you're helping the other guy win. What that person is telling you is, hey, your voice does not matter. You believe because I'm no better than you. It's very insulting, actually. And I tell people, we're not spoilers. We're participants in the political process. We cannot help it that the two-party system has given us this terrible plurality voting system in most places that allows this so-called spoiler effect to happen. If they didn't want spoiler effects, they could change this to ranked choice voting, approval voting, or anything else that removes the spoiler effect. But they don't want to do that because they know that it will break down their power. And so the truth is we're not spoilers for participating. They're the spoilers for changing the process to something that doesn't allow voters to really have their voice heard in a way that resonates.
Yeah, I've looked into a lot of those things. I had the lady on, Annie Kalin, to talk about star voting. I definitely am favoring some type of reform for this, but I don't know where we'd go from there. Obviously, with the pride flag, what kind of gay have you gotten a lot of positive reception from some of the gay organizations like Pink Pistols or?
Well, Pink Pistols is specifically non-partisan. They don't endorse people, though I am a big supporter of theirs. That's why I shouted them out in the Senate debate last year when I said that armed gays are harder to oppress and harder to bash. That's kind of a takeoff on their line. But I will say I love going out amongst the LGBTQ community. Again, that's the reason why I'm a libertarian, is because the Libertarian Party was doing outreach at Atlanta Pride. That's what got me in the door. So I think it's important that we do reach out to that community, particularly because part of being LGBTQ is your right to self-expression, to be who you are and express yourself in a way that makes you comfortable. So long as you're doing it in peace, that's exactly along the libertarian line, right? And so I think there's a lot of crossover there. And I say this, the modern gay rights movement started because of Stonewall, which was an action against police being abusive towards LGBTQ people and pushing back against that state abuse and actually fighting back because they were being aggressed against. I can think of nothing more libertarian than standing up against abusive government and fighting back for your right to be who you are in peace. And so I encourage people to get involved. And I got a great response. I just went to the Chicago Pride Parade this past summer, and I was amazed with the response that I got. Like, people literally going, yeah, the libertarians, we love the libertarians, and blue Chicago. And so much so that when I was passing out literature, came and gave me a hug, and she whispered in my ear, I'm going to come out as a libertarian. I said, that is awesome. I love it. And so I think it's something that we need to be continuing, is that the libertarian message has been and always should be that so long as you're living your life in peace, you should be able to express yourself and as you see fit. You should be able to love who you want to love and live how you want to live. That's distilled down liberty for each and every person, regardless of whether you're LGBTQ or not. So I think that's a message we can continue to push out. And I'm happy to do that as an LGBTQ person.
Yes, and of course, John Hospers.
Yeah, our first nominee, man. So let's continue. Let's just say I'm a John Hospers libertarian.
Yeah. Yeah, John Hospers. I never got to meet him, but he certainly heard good things about him. I mean, there's been a lot. We've had some really great people in the movement, and even some great objectivists. I mean, Chris Matthews Scabar is one of my favorite people. He's a New Yorker. I'm sure he can talk about Stonewall. There's a lot of good people out there doing a lot of good work. That's one thing I've learned from doing this show. I haven't asked the other candidates this, but I got to confess, I have recorded 6 shows talking about Milei in Argentina. Are you paying any attention to that?
Oh, absolutely. Of course you're paying attention to that. You got to, because anybody who is on the libertarian spectrum anywhere getting elected to office is a major deal. And the fact that he is running for the highest office in the land out in Argentina really does pique my interest. I want to see if he does win, exactly how he's going to start the reforms, where he's going to start. That's always the big question, is like, where do you start dismantling the state? Well, let's get a libertarian elected to higher office and see where we start, because I think it'll be very interesting to watch. And hopefully, once people see if a libertarian does get elected to the chief executive position in the nation, maybe people will look at electing a libertarian to be the chief executive of the United States with a little bit more fervor and energy and enthusiasm, especially if Argentina starts to thrive under such things. So I'd be very interested to see how that happens. Of course, I'm watching that and with very much anticipation to see how that rolls out. I think all of the libertarian sphere is really paying attention.
Yeah, definitely. I'd probably start my first month as president just issuing pardons. But what would your first day in the White House look like? What would you do your first day, first week?
So I say my first hour, right, is I'm going to take the oath. And during my speech, one of the first things I'm going to say during my speech is that I'm issuing a full blanket pardon to Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, and Ross Ulbricht. And then I will then say, oh, and by the way, every single person who's in federal prison for nothing but drugs will be pardoned by the end of the day. I'm not going to go through the formal pardon process. We're just going to go ahead and start doing that immediately over the next coming weeks. We're going to get people out of jail. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Second thing I'm going to do after I give that lovely, rousing speech about how we're going to take down the state and we're going to reduce that impact in people's lives, I'm going to ask that the Joint Chiefs join me in the White House with my respective Department of Defense nominee to be Secretary of Defense. And I'm going to tell them they have to immediately start removing the military footprint from every continent outside of North America. And they're going to present me a budget that's 15% cut for every branch. We're going to cut the Pentagon spending bloat immediately. I know that's going to piss off the military-industrial complex, but I really don't care. If they lose jobs at Boeing or at Raytheon, they can go find jobs elsewhere, or they can start making things like cars or other things. You know, they don't have to just make weapons of war and death. They can diversify. So we're going to start reducing the Pentagon footprint immediately. And then from then on, I'm going to go and give a not demand, but ask that I can speak to a joint session of Congress. This will be in the first month. And I'm going to say, I want a balanced budget on my desk. And if it's not balanced, I will veto it. And if you want to override that veto, go right ahead. But I'm going to quit bankrupting America's future by having an unbalanced budget and debts and deficits. That's going to be on your hands, not on my hands if you want to do it. But if you want me to sign any budget, it better be a balanced budget that at least gets us back to 2019 spending levels. Because if we have that at current revenue levels, we're actually beyond balance. We're actually paying down a little bit in surplus. We can pay down the debt. But I will not be a party to any budget that is not getting us on the path towards paying down the debt and removing this burden from the future generations of Americans. So that'll be my main policy focus in the first 100 days, is getting Congress to get its act together and start making the cuts they need to, as well as, you know, reducing the state's impact in our lives through every executive agency as much as I can, using only the constitutional authority granted to me. Because here's the deal. If I go outside of the bounds of the Constitution, doesn't matter how libertarian or how great it is, that gives license and permission for presidents after me to do it who are going to be more statist. So I have to act within my bounds, but I'll do everything I can to reduce the state via the constitutional means. So it'll be an interesting first 100 days for sure.
Yes, it sure will be. I mean, yeah, so... And, you know, who's responded most positively to your message so far? I mean, older, younger, male, female?
I think a lot of the folks is younger generations, millennials and Gen Z in particular, who are really sick and tired of what I call 20th century politicians being in charge of the mechanisms of government in the 21st century. They see this aging Congress. They see the Dianne Feinsteins, the Mitch McConnells of the world, who have been in power for 30 years even, Joe Biden, 50 years. And they're sick and tired of it. They want more choices. That's the other thing, is just Gen Z in particular. They don't like being limited to two binary choices. They hate that in the marketplace. They like to have alternatives. And so we're going to start seeing more of that in the political landscape, I think, from young folks. And in particular, those are the people that I think are most excited about really getting on board with something new and different that aren't already in our sphere. It's hard to get somebody who's been voting Republican or Democrat for 50 years to stop pulling that lever. It's much easier to get those people who have maybe not voted that many times, or this is their first election, to get them to jump outside the box and to look at something different. And once they do that first time, for the rest of their lives as voters, they'll say, hey, what else is out there? Are there other alternatives? And that's what we want to do with this campaign in 2024, is awaken a new libertarian generation of voters, because in 10 to 15 years, Gen Z will be the largest voting bloc in this country. And as I say, if you don't sow the seeds, you have no crop to harvest in 15 years. And so we need to be long-term about how we're going to grow this party, grow this movement for the long haul throughout the first half of this century and on into the next half.
Yeah, we definitely need, there's definitely different ways we need to look at that. You know, what do you, looking at some of the past campaigns you've seen, who do you think really did what did you see that was done really well in your opinion?
Well, you know, sometimes you have to actually look outside just the libertarian box to see campaigns that are very successful. Look at what Barack Obama did. He did exactly what I'm talking about, but you know, in 2008, engaging a next generation of voters. And because of that, you're seeing that states like Georgia are more blue than they would be, because those voters aged into being the mainline largest pool of voters. We need to be doing the same thing. And I think we do that by doing a lot of, frankly, what that campaign did, which is engaging positive messaging, aspirational messaging. But here's the difference. When we get elected, we're actually going to go through on the promises that we made. We're not going to sell ourselves out to the establishment, which is exactly what that campaign did once it became an administration, right? They say campaign and government, campaign in poetry and govern in prose. He campaigned in poetry and governed in, like, I don't know what it was. It was just a complete abandonment of everything he had promised as a candidate. So we need to avoid that second half. But the first half, engaging new young voters in a positive manner, is something that I think we need to pick up on as a Libertarian Party, using our libertarian philosophy and our principles, which I think are far better than what Barack Obama was offering in 2008. But in terms of more modern campaigns, like I said, Donald Rainwater, man, he picked up at the right place, right time, got the right energy with the Indiana voter. to really speak to them, and really made waves and got a lot of support in ways that we hadn't. And then, of course, my political mentor in the movement is John Mons. The guy is a guy who is a radical, who knows how to take those radical principles and preach that is very sensible to the average voter. First libertarian to ever earn over 1 million votes in any contest anywhere. So he is really my political mentor. He's the guy that got me in the movement. And really, when it comes to that kind of reasoned dialogue around even radical issues, that's the kind of guy I like to try to be.
Yeah, the other thing about Mons is he's built a lot of bridges to a lot of different organizations out there. He's very much, he's very much involved with the community, I think. And he's just a really nice guy. He comes off as very non-threatening, very soft-spoken. One thing, you're right about rainwater, but I think one thing that really pushed rainwater was, the Corona policies, and he really came out and said, I oppose these Corona policies, and that got a whole lot of, especially, red voters in Indiana to go over to his side.
Yeah, well, I think it is speaking the libertarian message, right? We oppose government mandates at every level. And that even includes for good things, right? Like we have the saying that good ideas don't require force. That's exactly how we should be treating anything. Like in a pandemic, right? You don't have to have government forcing your behavior. You'll adjust your own behavior based on the conditions in the ground and based on advice that you can get from people that aren't being funneled through, and only this information channel, anything else must be censored or pushed away. Like, I think that actually creates more distrust in those official channels. It was the biggest mistake that government made there, is that they tried to clamp down on information. It really screwed the pooch there, so to speak, to use language that my grandpa uses all the time.
Yeah.
But, really we need to be speaking out against these mandates, because there was such an impact beyond just the disease itself, right? In terms of the economic impact of the closures and the lockdowns. You see businesses closing while big box stores remained open. And so the people who continued to thrive and flourish and make tons of money were the people who, lo and behold, were the politically well-connected people who always controlled our government. Meanwhile, the little guy, the small business, the average entrepreneur really got screwed over in that stuff. And then we also had to talk about the impact of the fact that so many people weren't able to see their loved ones. They were divided along plate glass. Like, how many people had to say goodbye to their grandparents or their other loved ones through plexiglass, through plastic, because they couldn't hold the hand of their loved one as they were passing away. Those are tragic stories, and they deserve to have advocates for them. And so I'm happy to be a libertarian who says, the entire government response to the pandemic from the beginning to today has been just really haphazard, wrong. And frankly, it deserves investigating into what went wrong and who made it go wrong, and to punish those accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah, were you out at any protests back in 2020 or?
Oh, absolutely. So I was both in protests against lockdowns as well as protests for criminal justice reform, where people were getting out in large numbers. And frankly, I have to say I was blessed where I am in Georgia, as we were one of the least lockdown states compared to some others. Folks out in California or in New York or in some of the northeastern states, they were in a more than us. And that is because the government there was just so attuned to just being able to crack down their population. Down here in the South, we're a little bit less apt to let government do that to us. And so we had a little bit less of an impact on that, but we had major economic impacts here in Georgia. And the biggest impact that I say is on education of children with the lockdowns at schools.
Yeah.
But I also think there's a silver lining. It exposed so many people to how bad public school education was when they had to see it through a Zoom lens at home. And it got so many people to abandon that system in favor of charter school education or even homeschool education. And I really think it's pushed this fund students, not systems movement that we've seen in states all over the country. And of course, as a presidential candidate, that's something I support. Let's get rid of the Department of Education federally, return them, and encourage states and localities to actually just let students, if you're going to fund anything, fund the students, let that funding follow them to whatever school they want to go to with their parents in consultation. And I think that's the best path. And I think COVID, as terrible as it was, and it was terrible for the economy, it was terrible for people's health, it was terrible for people's livelihoods. But the one silver lining, I think, is it exposed how bad public education is in so many localities, and it encouraged people to look elsewhere. And so let's continue that momentum forward into 2024.
Yeah, just having been there a couple weeks ago, I can just imagine what that airport looked like. The busiest airport in the world.
It's still a nightmare to get through. But yeah, during the height of the pandemic, it was, let's just say, when you had to enforce social distancing to get through TSA lines, like, and then you realize like how just arbitrarily and stupid some of those rules are. Nothing is dumber than when you have to go through a TSA line. There's no real distancing you can do. So it kind of exposed a lot of that national security theater, which the TSA has always been as national security theater anyways, since its inception. So it just furthered that process through the pandemic years.
Yeah. Let's get back to what kind of criminal justice reforms do you favor?
So I'm an absolute believer in ending qualified immunity. If I was president, I would sign a bill to end qualified immunity for federal law enforcement. I'm a big believer in liability insurance for police officers, because when you do wrong and then you do get that civil restitution, it shouldn't come out of the rest of the city's budget. It should be coming out of that officer's liability policy. And again, with that liability policy, if you do wrong, you get priced out of the job. You will eventually not be able to get covered. An insurance company won't cover you because you've done too many bad things. And then you're out of the job. And so that's a great market force to keep bad police off the beat. I'm also a big believer in ending mandatory minimum sentencing. What that does is that ties the hands of judges, forces people to take plea deals for lesser charges, for lesser sentences. And in reality, it just creates a muck of our entire justice system. I also am opposed to the death penalty. I think, we've seen so many people, I think the number is like 1 in 8 right now. People who've been put to death in the last 25 years have been exonerated later on through DNA evidence and other things. So if 1 in 8 is far too many, 1 is far too many. And I also just think morally, giving the government the right to end your life gives them the right to control every aspect of your life, if you really think about it. So it's just not something I've always jived with. And I know this sounds crazy as a libertarian, but I oppose private prisons. I think when you create a profit motive around imprisoning people, it creates an entire lobbying force that buys and pays for legislatures to create more criminalized society. And as a minarchist, I think prisons are one of the few responsibilities that government actually holds. And I would like to see, well-run prisons. I would like to see prisons that focus on restitution towards, people being paying back what they've taken away from society, as opposed to mere punitive damage and punishment. But I don't think that should be done in the private market, because you're creating a profit incentive to imprison people and create human misery. And we already have too many people who are in prison in this country.
Yes. And also, I don't know if this counts to that total, but these privatized detention centers for immigrants.
Oh, yeah.
That's a huge profit. Yeah.
So let me tell you a cross-partisan thing, man. We were protesting the immigration of ICE detainees in the Atlanta City jail, and we marched through the streets for it, and we're there. And we mentioned John Lewis, who I ran against. He was a Democrat. I don't agree with him on everything, but on this I did. And he's giving a speech, and he's saying, we're on the street here between two buildings. One is a federal building, segregationist and a racist. The building behind me is the MLK courthouse that's named after a champion of justice and freedom for all people. And when you think about how we're treating immigrants in this country, you need to ask yourself, what do you want to stand on? And it really brings into stark reality that we need to treat immigrants with empathy and respect and human rights, that all people have inherent liberty, not just Americans. Just because you were born on the side of an arbitrary line does not grant you more inherent liberty than anybody else. And it's high time that we treat immigrants with empathy and respect that we would treat anybody else with who sidesteps terrible laws, which we do every single day in this country as native-born citizens.
Yes, and of course, it also makes it easier for us to leave if we want to go somewhere else, like Argentina.
Exactly, right? If we want to go hang out with Malay in Argentina, we should be able to have ease of immigration policy both in and out of this country for our and for our business.
Yes, definitely. So, what were you got some? What kind of media appearances did you get during your? Because you were on some, I think you were on Kennedy and some other shows. Who was really supportive in the media for some of your past runs?
Yeah, so of course I did Kennedy, as you said. I did an appearance on the local NBC, ABC, CBS affiliates here in Atlanta. Of course, I got coverage in the New York Times, got coverage with Rolling Stone, Vice, Reason Magazine, the Washington Post covered me. I got covered by the Washington Examiner, which is a more conservative paper out there. So I got coverage from a lot of different people. Most of that came after I caused the runoff. Quite a bit was before, but most of it came after I caused the runoff and caused all that ruckus there. I got to disrupt the two-party system. And I look forward to getting more media as I disrupt the two-party system across all 50 states. And we've been getting great media as we travel across the country. I was just covering the Des Moines Register, as well as, at Iowa State Fair, we maybe got 10 media hits from all over the country. So we are definitely hitting the ground running with a full media strategy, and both old media as well as new media like podcasts like this.
Yeah, it's definitely getting out there. I think the media landscape is changing a lot. It's, and of course, putting out your own stuff, just talking about issues, it always helps.
I do live streams every Tuesday that I can, live at 5, so 5 Eastern. So I do try to put my own stuff out there as well, not to toot my own horn.
Yeah, talk about current events or things like that. Also, since you're in Atlanta, do you get involved with the Foundation for Economic Education at all, since they're in Atlanta now too? Or
I have a lot of friends who are both former or current members of FE who do a lot of great work out there. Absolutely. I've been to a few of their events that they've done in the past, as well as America's FE AF. They are another group that does great free market stuff out here. They got a lot of great work. So yeah, I've done definitely some work with those folks in the past, and some of my biggest supporters throughout my runs have been members of FE. And they're good folks out there, man. And I thank them for a lot of their articles and stuff, because a lot of their stuff does break down big ideas into digestible amounts that are great for folks to share. So check them out if you can. There's a free plug for them.
Oh yeah, well, I had Dr. Lawrence Reed on here too. I mean, he's probably one of the nicest advocates for free markets you'll ever meet. He tells good stories. That's one thing about telling stories. I mean, do you try to tell a lot of stories to people? Because it seems like stories are the most powerful motivators. You don't want to bore them with charts and graphs.
Oh yeah, it's realistic. You want to tie those ideas to people in a real way that makes sense. And people do react a lot more to a personal story about, hey, this happened to an individual, or this, like what we've seen recently. I'll be in Columbia, South Carolina, coming up on Tuesday. I've been out there recently to support a woman named Erica Brown. She feeds the homeless out there, and she was getting hassled by police, threatening with tickets. And it was because citizens got involved to go help her out, speak out to city council and other things, that she's been less bothered by police recently. And so we're going to keep that momentum up. But it makes sense when you go talk about, hey, government criminalizes feeding the homeless. You talk about an individual who has been threatened with that, or other people who who have been fined for feeding the homeless. It makes that idea a lot more easy to digest. Or when I talk about, like, in cannabis in Mississippi, there's an entire group that's being zoned out of the city of Gulfport, Mississippi, because they want to provide medical cannabis. Meanwhile, there is an opiate pill mill across the street from the site they want to build on. And Big Pharma, of course, has their hands in government everywhere. So it just, when you have those real stories about what happens as you travel across the country, it makes it more visceral to folks, for sure.
It definitely does. What do you think about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency?
I'm absolutely in support of it. I think, we should be able to put our money wherever we want to. And I think it's a great way to save your money and kind of protect it against some of the worst practices of fiat currency. Though I would like to get our money no longer being fiat money tied back to something that's tangible and realistic. That's going to be a long path to get there, man. So in the meantime, yeah, invest in crypto, invest in Bitcoin, hold your money, hold your privacy, spend your money how you want to. And thanks to the blockchain, you can do that with, the comfort of security there as well. So I think Bitcoin's a great idea.
Yeah, it's definitely a great idea. I think it's going somewhere.
I think it's absolutely gone somewhere. I knew a guy who said he paid for pizza one time in Bitcoin like 10 years ago. And he's like, man, if only I had that Bitcoin back, it'd be worth tens of thousands of dollars.
Oh, yes. You'll hear a lot of what ifs like that. I wonder how many of them are true. It's kind of like all these people who said they were at Woodstock.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yes. So, So where do you think you'll, you've got, it looks like you've gotten a lot of support out there. Have any other, what else would you like to, accomplish, in your campaign or as president?
Yeah, well, there's lots of victory, right? Like, first and foremost, I would love to be elected and to be the next president of the United States, so that I can get in and start tearing down the two-party system and the giant state apparatus that it has supported our entire lives, right? That's the main metric, right? But just under that is I want to make sure that we're hitting these goalposts in states all over the country to secure either ballot access or major party status in as many places as we can, so we can support that growing bench of libertarian talent that's going to be a generation of candidates that's going to help grow the movement. That'll be the next Donald Rainwaters, the next Chase Olivers, the next Gary Johnsons, the next whomever, right? Whoever runs in our party. We want to make sure that we're supporting those candidates at the grassroots level so that they can grow. And that's one of my next goals, right? Beyond winning, is making sure that the party can win in as many places as possible and grow, so this movement continues to grow in the political realm that is the Libertarian Party. That is my main real goal, is to make sure that more people have a positive brand image of what it means to be a libertarian, what it means to support libertarian policies than they do today. And that's what I want to do as our nominee for president. I want to improve the libertarian brand. I want to grow the libertarian movement, and I want to make sure we're winning elections all over the country. And if I can just do those things, I think it's a job well done, and I can retire as an elder statesman of the party at 40.
Yeah, you still look like you might actually get carded now and then, but you are about 40, right? Or
yeah, I will be 39 on election day. But as someone in Iowa said, are we sure we're getting a guy who even has his driver's license who's running for president with this guy? So I'm glad that I look young, but I'm about to be cracking 40, and much like many people in my generation, we're sick and tired of people who are in their 80s who refuse to let go. We want to have a new generation of leadership in this country, and I hope to be the option for the Libertarian Party, so that we can push that message outward as a party that it's high time that we get 20th century politicians out of the 21st century government.
Yeah, every time somebody tries to ask me to forecast the 2024 presidential election, I just say, well, there's always the possibility of a major medical event.
Hey, that can happen. And if Harris, happy to do that. Too, if the worst were to happen. I hope it doesn't happen. I pray nobody dies. Like, I don't like people dying, but if that were to happen, I assume they would put Kamala Harris up as their standard bearer, and I would look forward to running against probably the worst attorney general in California history. So I think we could do that too.
I don't think she's popular at all. It's I don't know who's
a surprise. You and everyone else think that.
I mean, but you never know what might happen. I think it's all very unusual the way things have been happening the past few years.
And we have a major opportunity as libertarians. Let's seize on it. You know what I'm saying? I think it's time that we put ourselves out there as boldly and as passionately and as emphatically as possible to make sure that we're having that impact and taking advantage of every opportunity 2024 offers us.
I remember now too. You announced you were running on Gary Nolan's show. Did you get any tips from Gary Nolan? Who ran for president back in 2004, of course, but did not get the nomination.
Privately, he basically said it's going to be a long slog and it's a really hard road to bear, but I'm glad somebody's doing it. So, I can say this: there's not just myself, but other people who have ever ran for the nomination or ran for president's liberty. It's a hard road to bear, but I look forward to being part of that process with them and being our nominee in 2024 and on through election day. And then, hey, 4 more years, let's do it. Like, let's get me elected and then do it for 8 years, right?
Yeah, Nolan was doing it in the pre-social media days, but that was a very interesting race too. The Nolan people absolutely did not want Aaron Russo. The Russo people absolutely did not want Gary Nolan, which is how Michael Badnarik ended up winning.
Well, what I can say is our conventions are always interesting. They're not pre-taped pep rallies like the Democrats and Republicans. And I encourage people to join the Libertarian Party. If you like what you heard from me, check out my campaign. I would really appreciate it. But also join the Libertarian Party in your state and nationally, so that way we can have all these great delegates going to our national convention in May of 2024 in D.C. I look forward to seeing everybody out there, yourself included, sir.
Yes, May 2024 in D.C. You said you had to get out pretty soon. You're going to Dragon Con, yeah. I
am going to Dragon Con Atlanta with my friends and family. It's a belated birthday celebration for myself since I had to be at the Iowa State Fair for my actual birthday. So we're going to have lots of fun this weekend. And thanks for providing me the opportunity, though, right before I head out the door to speak to you and other libertarians.
Anything else you want to say before we go?
Well, I would appreciate it if folks would check out my website, votechaseoliver.com. If you like what you see there, any donations that you give us are most appreciated. It helps me travel all across the country speaking a positive libertarian message to help us break through the two-party static. And if you want to follow me on social media, go to @ChaseForLiberty on X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, or I'm also on TikTok, Instagram, really YouTube, anywhere where you can find somebody. Look for Chase for Liberty, and I'll be there.
Yes, thank you, Chase. Please like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, follow the channel, and go buy my novel, Escape from the Village. Thank you, Chase Oliver, and we're out.